All right, so get this, guys. The rumor mill's going crazy about the iPhone 17 Pro design. Some leaks are saying there are some pretty wild changes. Our deep dive today is all about an article from eSIM Studios. They're a tech news site. They've been pretty reliable with their info lately. And what they're saying has me wondering if Apple's going back in time a little. We're talking about maybe going back to aluminum and a camera bump that's totally different. And they might even be changing how wireless charging works.
Yeah, the aluminum thing is a real surprise. I mean, after all these years of Apple using stainless steel and titanium for their Pro iPhones, it feels like a big change.
Right. It's like they're rewinding their whole design thing. But why? Are they just trying to save some money on making the phones?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? Aluminum is cheaper than titanium. So that's a popular theory. But Apple usually doesn't mind charging a lot for their phones. I don't think they're just trying to save a couple of bucks.
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean. They're not afraid to charge a lot if the design and features are good. So what's the reason? Could they be trying to make it feel like the old iPhones? You know, like the iPhone 5 and 5s? Those aluminum phones were really popular.
You know what? You might be right. There are definitely people who love that classic iPhone look. And there's been some talk online about the titanium on the iPhone 15 Pro maybe not being that strong. So maybe Apple wants to go back to something that everyone knows is really tough.
That's interesting. It's like they're going backwards to go forwards. Do you think this could be the start of a trend? Like, could other phone companies stop using those fancy materials and just go back to metal?
Yeah, that could definitely happen. We've seen a few other companies try different materials and finishes recently, so maybe Apple's just doing what everyone else is doing. Or maybe they're starting a new trend. It's hard to say for sure, but it's worth keeping an eye on. What do you think? You think this aluminum thing will become popular again?
I kind of like the idea of bringing back the old style. What about you listeners? Are you team aluminum or do you like those newer, fancier materials? Let us know on social media.
And while we're talking about materials, the leak says the iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max will have a back that's part glass. That's so they can still have wireless charging, even though it's aluminum. Now, that's confusing.
I know, right? How are they going to do that? Will there be a big, obvious line where the aluminum and glass meet? Or will they find some way to make it look smooth? I'm imagining it like a gradient, where the aluminum slowly turns into glass.
That would look really cool. Or maybe they'll copy other expensive phones and use ceramic. It looks and feels really nice, but you can still charge it wirelessly.
Okay, now I'm really interested. And you know what this means, right? Design challenge time. Listeners, if you were designing this phone with a glass and aluminum back, what would you do? Let us know your ideas. We want to see your sketches and designs and anything you can come up with.
This just shows how hard it is to make something look good and work well at the same time. They have to make wireless charging work without making the phone look bad. And everyone knows Apple loves those sleek, simple designs.
Absolutely. Okay, everyone, get ready because now we're talking about the big thing, the camera bore. This leak says it's going to be bigger, more noticeable, and rectangular. And guess what? It'll be made entirely of aluminum. Aluminum for a camera bump. What are they thinking?
It does seem strange, doesn't it? I mean, most phones use glass for the camera bump, so why switch to aluminum all of a sudden? Maybe they've got some super advanced camera technology that needs a really strong case.
That's what I was thinking. Maybe they made some new lens technology or a huge new sensor that needs a lot of space.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's about making it stronger. Aluminum's pretty tough, so maybe they're trying to make the camera bump harder to scratch or break.
It's a big change for sure.
Okay.
It'll be interesting to see how it affects the way the whole phone looks. Will they try to hide it, or will they make it part of the design?
Right, like are they going for this industrial tough look? I can already see them advertising it with the iPhone on top of a mountain. You know, like this phone can survive anything.
Exactly. But to be honest, most people don't really want a bigger camera bump. Everyone wants those thin, sleek phones, right? So is Apple really going to make it look worse just to make it work better?
Yeah. That's the question. And are WE, the people who buy the phones, okay with a bigger bump if it means the camera is much better?
Right.
It's a trade-off, for sure.
Yeah.
But hey, maybe they'll surprise us with some super clever design that makes us forget all about the bump.
I guess we'll have to wait and see. You know, all this talk about the camera bump made me think about another rumor. They say the iPhone 17 Air is supposed to be the thinnest iPhone ever. So now I'm wondering if they'll try to make the Pro models super thin too.
Wow. Can they even make a super thin phone with a giant aluminum camera bump?
That's the challenge, isn't it? If you make a phone thin, it usually means the battery is smaller or there's less space inside for other stuff. But then you've got this big camera bump that makes it thicker. It's hard to get it right.
Okay, everyone, I need your help with this one. Let's play Would You Rather. Would you rather have an iPhone 17 Pro that's super thin even if the battery is smaller? Or would you rather have a phone that's a little thicker but the battery lasts longer?
And while you're thinking about that, don't forget that a thinner phone might not have as many features. Maybe the camera won't be as good, or there won't be as much storage space. Or maybe Apple will have to come up with some crazy new technology to make it all work.
This iPhone 17 Pro is going to be interesting, maybe even a little controversial. It's like they're trying everything to see what works.
And we're here for it. We've talked a lot here in part 1 of our deep dive. Let's take a break and come back for part 2. We'll talk even more about what these design choices could mean for people who buy phones and for the future of smartphones. You know, it's interesting to think about how people will feel about this whole aluminum thing. Some people might think it's a step backwards, especially since Apple's been using those fancy materials like titanium.
Right. Like, haven't we already done aluminum? But maybe Apple's hoping people will get nostalgic. You know, like, remember how much you loved your iPhone 5?
Exactly. But then there's these other things that are really different, like that part glass back and that huge camera bump. It's like they're trying to mix the old and the new. Will people like it?
I guess it depends on how they do it. If they can make it all look like it goes together, like it was planned that way, then maybe people will like it. But if it just looks like a bunch of random stuff thrown together, it might not work.
Totally. And this makes me think about something bigger. What does this mean for the future of phone designs? Is Apple doing something totally new here? Or are they making a mistake? Will other companies start using aluminum again?
That's a good question. I wonder if this will start a new trend. You know what else I was thinking about? Sustainability. We haven't talked about that yet. How does aluminum compare to those other materials when it comes to being eco-friendly?
That's a really good point. People are thinking more and more about how their gadgets affect the environment. So is aluminum a better choice for the planet? Is it easier to recycle than stainless steel or titanium? Phone companies are going to have to start answering these questions.
For sure. And it's not just about the materials themselves. It's also about how they're made and how much energy is used to make these phones. It's complicated. What do you guys think? Do you think about how good something is for the environment when you're buying a new phone? Let us know.
Okay, let's go back to that part glass back for a second. We talked about why they might be doing it, but we still don't know how they'll actually do it. How do you mix aluminum and glass so that they look like one piece?
It's a design challenge, isn't it? I wish I could see what they're doing over at Apple right now.
Me too. And I think this is part of a bigger trend in tech design. We're seeing more and more products that use different materials and textures. It's all about making things that look and feel interesting.
Totally. So let's pretend we're designers for a minute. If you had to design this phone with a part glass, part aluminum back, how would you do it?
That's a tough one. I think the most important thing is to make it so you can barely tell where the two materials meet. You wouldn't want a really obvious line or a big difference in how they feel. It needs to look like it was designed that way on purpose, not like they just stuck two things together.
I agree. It has to be smooth. Maybe they could use a technique similar to what they do with the ceramic shield on the front of the phone, where the glass slowly blends into the metal frame.
Ooh, I like that. Or maybe they could add a subtle pattern or texture that goes across both materials so it looks like they're connected.
Yeah, like a tiny etching or something. There are so many possibilities. That's why this is also interesting. Everyone in the tech world is trying to figure out what Apple's going to do.
And Apple loves that. They're really good at getting people excited and making them wait.
Okay, let's talk about the camera bump again. We've talked about how big it is and what it's made of. But let's get to the important part. What does this mean for how well the camera actually works?
Yeah, that's the real question. If they're making the bump bigger, they better be giving us some serious camera improvements.
Exactly. This can't just be about how it looks. We need to see some real benefits. So what do we think? Bigger sensors, new lenses. Tell us the good stuff.
Well, based on what we've heard and how big that bump is, it's safe to say they're putting some powerful hardware in there. We could see bigger sensors for better low-light photos, a wider field of view, and more detail in the pictures.
Ooh, I like the sound of that. And what about the lenses? Any rumors about a periscope telephoto lens?
There have been a few rumors about that, and if it's true, it would be amazing. Imagine being able to zoom in on things far away and still get a super clear picture, all from your phone.
I want that. You know what else I was thinking? This whole camera bump thing might actually be good for people who love photography. It's like Apple's finally giving the camera enough space.
That's a good point. It's like they're saying we're serious about photography, and we don't mind making the phone a little thicker to make the camera amazing.
Exactly. And honestly, a lot of people already care more about the camera than how thin the phone is. We all use our phones as our main cameras now, so it makes sense that Apple would focus on making the camera really, really good.
And don't forget about video. We're recording more and more videos on our phones these days, and a bigger camera bump could mean better video stabilization, better quality in low light, and maybe even support for higher resolutions.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I'm already picturing myself shooting amazing videos with the iPhone 17 Pro.
And that brings us back to the whole looks versus function debate. Yeah, a bigger camera bump might not look as nice, but if it means you get much better photos and videos, a lot of people might be okay with that.
For sure. It's like, are we willing to give up a little bit of sleekness for an incredible camera experience?
And that's the question every phone company is trying to figure out right now. How do you make a phone that looks good and works great?
Well, it seems like Apple's making some bold choices with the iPhone 17 Pro. They're taking risks, they're pushing boundaries, and they're definitely making us think.
And that's what makes all of this so interesting to watch.
We've talked about the aluminum comeback, we've explored the mysteries of the part glass back, and we've dug deep into that mega camera bump. But there's one more big question we need to answer. How will all of this affect you, the person who might actually use this phone? Stay tuned for part 3 of our deep dive, where we'll wrap things up and explore how these design choices could change the world of smartphones. All right, deep divers, we've been talking a lot about the iPhone 17 Pro rumors, and it's time to step back and figure out what it all means. We've talked about aluminum and the part glass back and that huge camera bump, and it makes me wonder, what does this mean for you, the person who might actually use this phone?
That's a really good question. And I think this whole deep dive has shown us that technology isn't just about specs and features, it's about how those things actually affect how we use our devices.
Exactly. So let's talk about that. If these rumors are true, will the iPhone 17 Pro be a success or a flop?
Well, it's definitely going to get people talking. I mean, think about it. Going back to aluminum after all this time, a part glass back that no one really knows how they're going to make, and a camera bump that's bigger than ever. Apple's making some big changes here. It'll be interesting to see what people think.
It's almost like they're throwing a bunch of ideas out there to see which ones work. Some people might love the old school feel of the aluminum, while others might not like it. Some might be curious about the part glass back, while others might think it's weird or unnecessary, and that camera bump. Well, let's just say people are going to have different opinions.
Exactly. And that's what makes this so interesting. It's not a simple case of this is good or this is bad. It's more complicated than that. It's about what people like and what's important to them and how we feel about different parts of a smartphone.
Okay, so let's talk about how these design choices will affect people who actually use the phone every day.
All right, let's start with aluminum. If they do go back to using aluminum, it could mean the phone will be lighter than the titanium models. That could be good for people who think those phones are too heavy. And aluminum is usually pretty strong, so you wouldn't have to worry too much about scratching or denting it.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about that part glass back? Is that going to be a problem? Like, will it break easily?
Well, we don't know exactly how they're going to make it, but if they do it right, it shouldn't be a problem. They could use a really strong type of glass, or they could make it stronger with some kind of metal frame. The important thing is to make the glass and aluminum blend together smoothly, so it feels like one solid piece, not two different things stuck together.
Okay, that makes me feel better. But what about that camera bump? That's the one I'm really worried about. I mean, is it going to make the phone wobble when it's on a table? Will it be uncomfortable to hold?
Those are good questions, and it's something Apple will definitely have to think about. They have some really smart engineers and designers, so I'm sure they'll come up with some good solutions. Maybe they'll spread the weight of the camera bump out more evenly, or maybe they'll design the back of the phone so that it doesn't wobble as much.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Because if they can do it, they can make a phone with a giant camera bump that still feels good to hold. That'd be pretty amazing.
It would definitely change things, and it could set a new standard for other phone companies.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one last thought. The iPhone 17 Pro is looking like it's going to be one of the most interesting and maybe even controversial releases we've seen in a while.
Yeah.
Apple is taking risks, pushing boundaries, and they're definitely not afraid to try new things.
And that's what makes it so exciting. We don't know for sure how it's all going to turn out, but we'll be watching closely, and we'll be here to explain it all to you as soon as we know more. So stay tuned.
And in the meantime, we want to hear from you. What do you think about these rumored design changes? Are you excited? Are you skeptical? Are you totally confused? Let us know on social media. Until next time, deep divers.